The loneliness of Christmas. The wind cut through the narrow streets like a sharp whisper, scattering last year's leaves across the snow-dusted pavement. Limei tightened her scarf around her neck, drawing her coat closer as she guided her daughters through the silent town. Christmas lights twinkled in the distance, festive banners swaying gently in the bitter winter air, but their glow did little to warm the hollow ache in her chest. Her apartment had never felt smaller than this Christmas Eve. The tiny living room smelled faintly of old pine from the artificial tree she had set up days before. Xiaolan, her eldest at 9, carefully placed a paper ornament on a low branch, while 6-year-old Xiaohua clutched a worn stuffed rabbit, her eyes wide with hopeful anticipation. The room was cozy, but it carried a weight that made the walls feel like they were closing in. Limei sank onto the couch, watching her daughter's small hands move with careful precision. She forced a smile, but the memory of her husband lingered in the shadows. Only weeks ago, she had discovered the truth, a betrayal hidden in the quiet corners of her life. Messages she wasn't meant to see, photographs that made her blood run cold, and the realization that the man she had loved most had spent their final months deceiving her. She had tried to pretend, tried to keep the facade of a family intact, but the fracture ran too deep. Now, with him gone, the emptiness was louder than the festive music drifting faintly from a neighbor's radio. Xiaolan noticed her mother's sigh and reached over, fingers brushing Limei's hand. "Mama," she said softly, "will Christmas still be happy?" Her voice trembled slightly, a delicate echo of the fear that Limei had worked so hard to hide. Limei shook her head, forcing herself to answer with strength she didn't entirely feel. "We'll make it happy, darling, even if it's just the 3 of us." Yet the words felt hollow. She wanted to believe them, to shield her daughters from the cold truth of loneliness, but she feared the night stretching ahead, empty and long. Xiaohua tugged at her sleeve. "Can we at least bake cookies? Like last year?" Her small, hopeful face lifted toward her mother, and Limei nodded, grateful for the distraction. She rose and led the girls to the tiny kitchenette, the familiar motions of measuring flour and stirring sugar offering a temporary reprieve from her thoughts. The aroma of vanilla and cinnamon filled the room, and for a fleeting moment, the apartment felt warm, almost like a home again. Yet the reality outside could not be ignored. Limei's phone remained silent, no calls from family, no messages from friends. The invitations that once filled her calendar had vanished, leaving her with the stark knowledge that they had nowhere to go. Her parents lived hundreds of miles away. Old friends were wrapped up in their own celebrations. Pride and past disappointments had built invisible walls around her, leaving her isolated in a town that moved on without her. As the last cookies baked, Limei glanced out the window at the soft snowfall. A small, solitary ranch lay on the outskirts of town, its windows glowing faintly against the night. She had heard whispers about the rancher, Jack Harper, a man known for his quiet generosity. Rumor had it he had helped families during harsh winters, offered food, and sometimes even shelter. Limei frowned, hesitant at the thought. Pride, fear, and the memory of betrayal warred in her chest. Could she trust another man? Could she let someone else step into the fragile world she had built for her daughters? Xiaolan, noticing her mother's distant gaze, whispered, "Mama, maybe we could go see him, just for a little while." Xiaohua clutched her hand tightly, eyes wide with innocent hope. Limei hesitated, weighing the options. She didn't want to ask for help, didn't want to appear weak, but the thought of her daughters facing another lonely Christmas night, their small faces heavy with disappointment, pierced her heart. With a deep breath, she straightened her back and smiled, the first genuine one that evening. "All right," she said quietly. "We'll try, just for tonight." The girls erupted in quiet cheers, dancing around the apartment with renewed excitement, their laughter echoing off the walls. Limei watched them, a fragile warmth blooming inside her. Perhaps this Christmas would not be so empty after all. The snow continued to fall outside, cloaking the streets in silence. Limei gathered her coat and wrapped her scarf snugly around her neck once more. She held Xiao Hua's hand and guided Xiao Lan beside her, stepping out into the quiet night. Somewhere ahead, the lights of the ranch flickered, a beacon of possibility. And for the first time in weeks, Li Mei allowed herself to imagine hope. The rancher's kindness. The path to the ranch was lined with snow-laden trees, their branches bowing under the weight of winter's hush. Li Mei's daughters trudged through the powder, their boots leaving small prints that vanished almost as quickly as they were made. Xiao Hua hummed a quiet tune, a child's song to chase away the lingering shadows of worry, while Xiao Lan kept a steady pace beside her mother, eyes sharp for any sign of discomfort. Li Mei clutched her scarf, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and hesitation. She had never trusted a stranger so quickly, yet the thought of shelter, warmth, and human kindness drew her forward. The ranch came into view, a sturdy wooden home with smoke curling from the chimney, casting a welcoming glow against the dim evening sky. Lights twinkled along the roofline, modest but cheerful, reflecting off the snow in a way that seemed almost magical. Li Mei hesitated at the edge of the yard, uncertainty twisting in her chest. Pride and caution clashed with her maternal instinct. She wanted nothing more than a safe haven for her daughters, but the memory of betrayal made her wary. A figure appeared at the doorway before she could knock. Jack Harper, the rancher she had heard whispers about, stepped into view. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with calloused hands that spoke of years of labor. Yet his eyes were warm, framed by laugh lines that hinted at a gentle nature. He paused when he saw the three of them, concern flickering across his face. "Evening," he said, his voice calm and inviting. "You look like you've been out in the cold for a while. Are you all right?" Li Mei hesitated, uncertain whether to explain. Her daughters shifted behind her, sensing the tension. She nodded curtly. We were hoping for shelter for the night, just until morning." Jack's expression softened. "You come to the right place. Come in. I've got the fire going, and there's cocoa waiting." His tone was simple, devoid of pretension, but layered with genuine concern. Without waiting for a formal invitation, he stepped aside, gesturing toward the doorway. Inside, the ranch smelled faintly of pine and wood smoke, a scent that wrapped around Li Mei like a soft blanket. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting shadows that danced across the room. Jack moved with quiet efficiency, handing Xiao Hua a warm blanket and offering Xiao Lan a seat near the fire. Li Mei lingered near the doorway, observing how naturally he attended to her daughters, how he anticipated their comfort without intrusion. "You can take off your coats here," Jack said, indicating a bench by the entrance. "I'll get you some hot chocolate and cookies fresh from the oven." Li Mei felt an unfamiliar tightness in her chest. She had expected charity to come with a price, with expectation, or even with pity. But Jack's presence carried none of that. There was no judgment in his eyes, only quiet empathy, a recognition of fatigue and need. She nodded, allowing herself to step further inside. As the girls sipped cocoa and nibbled on cookies, Jack shared stories of the ranch, tales of snowstorms weathered, animals cared for, and neighbors helped. Li Mei listened from the couch, her attention half on the words, half on the warmth that seemed to seep into her bones. She realized how long it had been since she had spoken with someone who treated her with such unguarded kindness. Xiao Lan's curiosity broke the brief silence. "Mama, does he live here alone?" Her tone was cautious, testing boundaries as she often did when confronted with unfamiliar adults. Li Mei smiled faintly, watching Jack pour another mug of cocoa. "Yes," she said, "he lives here by himself." She glanced at her daughters, her mind grappling with caution. Could she allow herself to trust this man, who seemed so genuine, without fearing the shadows of her past? Jack noticed her gaze and offered a small, understanding smile. "Don't worry," he said gently. "I've had my share of rough winters, but helping others makes them a little easier. You and your girls are welcome here tonight. That's all." The fire crackled, the warmth spreading through the room as the snow fell silently outside. Li Mei watched her daughters laugh at something Jack had said. A small joke, nothing significant, yet enough to spark smiles that lit the room. She felt a cautious hope taking root, fragile but undeniable. Perhaps, just for tonight, they could forget the emptiness and the past betrayals. The clock ticked toward nightfall, and Li Mei rose to check on her daughters, brushing a strand of hair from Xiaohua's forehead. "Thank you," she murmured, not needing to explain further. Jack's simple nod acknowledged her gratitude without requiring words, his presence steady and reassuring. For the first time in weeks, Li Mei felt a small but significant shift, loneliness yielding to warmth, fear softened by kindness. And as she watched the firelight flicker in Jack's eyes, she realized that perhaps Christmas, even in the wake of heartbreak, could hold a spark of hope. Healing in the warmth of the ranch. The morning sun broke gently over the horizon, spilling gold across the ranch's snow-covered fields. Li Mei stirred awake to the quiet hum of the wind and the soft clatter of feeding animals outside. She stretched, her shoulders stiff from the previous night's tension, and glanced at her daughters, still curled under warm blankets near the hearth. Xiao Hua's small hand rested atop a stuffed rabbit, while Xiao Lan lay beside her, brows furrowed in thought. Li Mei's heart ached with a tender protective instinct. The girl's happiness had become her compass, and the weight of her past sorrows felt both heavy and distant under the calm morning light. Jack Harper emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of steaming mugs and freshly baked pastries. He moved with a quiet rhythm, careful not to startle anyone. Li Mei noted the way he paused, offering a small nod of greeting before setting the tray down on the table. "Morning," he said softly. "Thought you might like breakfast before the chores begin." Li Mei felt a flicker of surprise. He remembered details, anticipated needs, but without the intrusive attention that often accompanied kindness. She smiled faintly. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice carrying both gratitude and hesitation. The girls clambered to the table, their laughter filling the room. Jack helped them pour cocoa into mugs, his hands large but gentle, guiding Xiao Hua's smaller ones with patience. Xiao Lan, ever perceptive, watched from the corner of her eye, curiosity tempered by caution. She had learned early how fragile her mother's heart could be, and she observed Jack with the careful calculation of someone who both hoped and feared. Li Mei joined them, taking a seat beside her daughters. The warmth from the fire and the aroma of baked cinnamon mingled, forming a cocoon that allowed her thoughts to drift. She reflected on the night before, the simple gestures, the quiet respect, the absence of judgment. For the first time in weeks, she felt a subtle ease in her chest, a sense of safety that she had not known in months. Yet, beneath it, the ache of her husband's betrayal lingered, a shadow that refused to be fully ignored. After breakfast, Jack led the girls to help with the morning chores, showing them how to feed the chickens and gather eggs. Li Mei watched from the doorway, hesitant at first, but gradually allowing herself to breathe. She observed how naturally the girls adapted, their laughter ringing like bells in the crisp morning air. Jack's gentle instructions, his patience, his ability to make small work feel like play, it all drew her attention, stirring emotions she had buried deep beneath grief. When the chores were complete, they returned inside, and Jack suggested they decorate the barn for a small Christmas gathering later in the day. Li Mei hesitated, memories of loneliness and past disappointment tightening her chest. Jack noticed her pause. "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for," he said quietly, meeting her eyes. "I just thought, maybe the girls could use some fun." Li Mei nodded, touched by his understanding. That would be nice." As they strung lights and placed ornaments, Li Mei found herself laughing softly at Xiao Hua's antics, and even Xiao Lan allowed a small smile to escape. Jack moved beside her, adjusting a strand of ribbon that had fallen. His hand brushed hers briefly, a fleeting contact, but it was enough to stir warmth and hesitation all at once. Li Mei felt her pulse quicken, a mix of fear and curiosity. Could she allow herself to feel something again? Could she trust that warmth without fearing it would be taken away? Later, as they paused to rest, Jack handed her a mug of hot cocoa. The steam curled between them, and for a moment, the room was silent except for the crackling fire and the distant wind outside. "It's okay to feel," he said gently. "Even after being hurt, even after betrayal. Feeling doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." Li Mei looked into his eyes, searching for motives, for flaws, but found only honesty. A part of her wanted to speak, to tell him everything, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the fear, but words caught in her throat. Instead, she sipped the cocoa, letting warmth seep into her hands and her heart. The girls ran ahead, squealing with delight as they placed the final ornaments on the barn's tree. Li Mei and Jack watched them, sharing a quiet moment of understanding. No promises were made, no confessions forced, only a gentle acknowledgement that trust could be rebuilt slowly, one small act of kindness at a time. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the snow, Li Mei realized something remarkable. For the first time in weeks, her heart felt a tentative spark of hope, not just for herself, but for her daughters. Perhaps Christmas, despite past betrayals, could hold warmth, connection, and the quiet beginnings of love. And as she glanced at Jack, standing nearby with a patient smile, she allowed herself a small, cautious thought. Maybe some kindness, when given freely, could heal even the most wounded heart. Christmas miracles and new beginnings. The ranch was alive with quiet anticipation as evening settled over the snowy fields. Twinkling lights hung along the barn rafters, casting warm, golden reflections on the fresh snow outside. Li Mei adjusted the last ornament on the small, rustic Christmas tree, her hands trembling slightly, not from cold, but from the unfamiliar mix of hope and caution swirling in her heart. Her daughters, Xiao Lan and Xiao Hua, darted around the room, placing homemade decorations and giggling with the kind of uninhibited joy that only children could summon. For once, the weight of past betrayals seemed distant, softened by laughter and light. Jack Harper appeared at the doorway, carrying a tray of hot cocoa and fresh pastries. His movements were calm and assured, the kind of presence that felt like a steady anchor in a stormy sea. He paused, watching the girls' delight before looking at Li Mei. "They've done a wonderful job," he said softly. "You should be proud." Li Mei gave a small smile, warmth blooming despite her lingering doubts. "We're all proud," she replied, her voice carrying both gratitude and quiet introspection. She realized how much she had missed the simplicity of connection, of being part of something larger than her solitude. As the three of them gathered around the fireplace, the aroma of pine, cinnamon, and warm pastries enveloped the room. The girls leaned against her sides, and for a moment, Li Mei allowed herself to relax completely. She had expected Christmas to be lonely, a reminder of loss and betrayal. But here, amid the soft flicker of firelight and the gentle hum of contentment, she felt something she hadn't dared to hope for: belonging. Jack knelt beside the girls, showing them how to hang tiny handmade stars on the tree. "Each one represents a wish," he explained. "You can wish for anything, big or small." Xiao Hua's eyes sparkled as she whispered her wish quietly into her hands, while Xiao Lan hesitated, her gaze flicking toward Li Mei. "Mama, can I wish for something for you too?" she asked. Li Mei's throat tightened, and she nodded, unable to find words. The gesture, simple yet profound, reminded her that hope could still thrive in small acts of love. Later, as the snow fell more thickly outside, Jack invited Li Mei to step onto the porch, away from the children's giggles and chatter. The world beyond the ranch seemed softened, cloaked in quiet magic under the winter sky. "You've been through so much," he said, his voice steady, carrying no judgment. "And yet, here you are, still caring, still protecting them. That takes courage." Li Mei looked into his eyes, searching for hidden motives, for the faintest trace of selfishness, but found none. Only sincerity, patience, and an unspoken understanding of what it meant to be wounded, yet continue to trust. She felt a fragile warmth unfurling within her, the kind that reminded her heart it could still feel, still hope, still love. I'm not used to this," she admitted softly, her fingers tightening around the scarf at her neck. "I've been hurt before, betrayed. I don't know if I—" Her voice faltered. Jack gently placed his hand near hers, careful, respectful, giving space yet offering comfort. "You don't have to know everything," he said quietly. "Sometimes it's enough to just take the next step, one moment at a time." Li Mei swallowed, a mixture of relief and apprehension swirling inside her. She realized that trust didn't demand certainty. It demanded courage, patience, and the willingness to allow someone to be present without expectation. Inside, the girls had draped themselves over the soft rug in front of the fire, exhausted but content. Their laughter had faded into soft murmurs, and the room was filled with a calm intimacy. Li Mei returned to them, kneeling to brush a loose strand of hair from Xiaolan's forehead, then hugging Xiao Hua close. The warmth of their embrace, the gentle rise and fall of their breathing, anchored her in a way that nothing else could. Jack watched quietly from the doorway, a small smile tugging at his lips. He respected the delicate rhythms of their family, aware that connection grew slowly, carefully, and that tonight was only the beginning. As the fire crackled and the snow shimmered under the moonlight, Li Mei allowed herself to hope. For her daughters, for herself, for the quiet possibility that love, genuine, patient, and kind, could exist again. She didn't need to rush, didn't need to erase the past. She only needed to embrace the present. The night deepened, the ranch bathed in soft light, laughter, and warmth. Outside, snowflakes danced in the gentle wind, covering the world in a blanket of stillness and magic. Inside, Li Mei held her daughters close, their small hands clasped in hers, and glanced toward Jack, whose presence was steady and reassuring. A Christmas she had feared would be empty had transformed into something more, a sanctuary of trust, hope, and tentative love. And in that quiet, glowing moment, Li Mei understood something profound. Even after heartbreak, even after betrayal, new beginnings were possible. Sometimes the simplest acts of kindness could heal wounds, light the way, and show that the heart could always find a reason to believe again.